At 64, Wayne Gretzky still carries the calm presence that once ruled the ice. His smile is gentle, his eyes steady, the same eyes that once read the game faster than anyone alive. He scored 894 goals, collected more than 2,000 points, won 4 Stanley Cups, and earned the title that will never fade, the Great One. Yet behind the elegance was a man who took countless hits. Night after night, defenders came for him. He was knocked down, bruised, even mocked for being soft, for playing with precision instead of brute force. But Gretzky never fought back. With fists, he fought with skill, intelligence, and vision. He was the most respectful man in hockey, the ultimate teammate, the player every kid wanted to be. Still, not every wound was healed. Not every rivalry was forgiven. There are 5 names that still live in his memory. 5 players he could never forgive. Before we reveal them, let's first understand who he truly was. Wayne Gretzky was born in Brantford, Ontario, a small Canadian town that would soon become legendary. By the age of 6, he was already a phenomenon, skating circles around kids twice his size. His father Walter built a backyard rink where young Wayne practiced until his skates cut grooves into the ice. Every night while others slept, he studied the game, not just how to score, but how to think faster than everyone else. When he entered the NHL in 1979, the league had never seen anyone like him. With the Edmonton Oilers, he turned intelligence into dominance. 4 Stanley Cups, dozens of scoring records, and an era that redefined hockey. He didn't just play, he orchestrated the ice like a conductor leading an orchestra. Every move seemed calculated, every pass timed to perfection. Despite his greatness, Gretzky never showed arrogance. He didn't shout, didn't fight, didn't boast. But inside, he was fiercely competitive. He hated losing more than he loved winning. Behind that calm face was a man who remembered every check, every insult, every player who tried to break him. Years of glory, pain, and rivalry shaped him into both the legend and the man he is today. And through it all, 5 names remained etched in his mind. 5 men he could never forgive, one of whom left a scar that never truly faded. Number 5. Mark Messier. Mark Messier was more than a teammate to Wayne Gretzky. He was a brother in arms, a warrior who shared every victory, every bruise, and every long night chasing greatness. Together they built the Edmonton Oilers into an unstoppable force during the 1,980 seconds. Gretzky's mind and Messier's strength complemented each other perfectly. Gretzky was the calm, the vision, the playmaker who could read the ice like no one else. Messier was the fire, the power, the heartbeat that drove the locker room. For nearly a decade, their connection turned the Oilers into a dynasty that defined Canadian hockey. Behind the scenes, their bond ran deep. They trusted each other completely. Messier often said that when Gretzky had the puck, you just had to skate and he would find you. Gretzky admired Messier's grit and leadership, how he carried the team through the toughest games. They were opposites in temperament, but identical in ambition. Every Stanley Cup they lifted together seemed to make their friendship stronger. Then came the summer of 1988. The world stood still when the Edmonton Oilers traded Wayne Gretzky to the Los Angeles Kings. Fans called it the darkest day in Canadian hockey. For Messier, it felt like a betrayal. He stayed in Edmonton, but something changed in him. The brotherhood that once bound them cracked under the weight of separation. He was determined to prove that he could lead the Oilers to victory without the Great One. 2 years later, Messier did just that. In 1990, he carried the team to another Stanley Cup. The celebration was wild, but for Gretzky, it was bittersweet. Watching his old teammate lift the trophy without him stirred emotions he never spoke about. The image of Messier raising the cup high above his head became a symbol of pride, but also of pain. When the Kings met the Oilers, their rivalry felt personal. Messier attacked every shift with intensity, checking Gretzky hard and challenging him on the puck. One hit stood out. Messier collided with Gretzky cleanly but fiercely, sending him spinning into the boards. The crowd roared. Gretzky stood up, adjusted his helmet, and skated away without a word. Later, when asked about it, he quietly said that it hurt more than any hit in his career. Those few words said everything. Years later, they appeared together at charity events and Hall of Fame ceremonies. They smiled for cameras and spoke of old memories, but the distance between them never disappeared. Gretzky had forgiven many things throughout his career, but this was different. The wound was not from a check or a fight. It came from the feeling that loyalty had turned into competition. For a man who built his career on trust and respect, seeing his closest ally become his fiercest opponent left a scar that no time could heal. Mark Messier represented more than rivalry. He represented the cost of greatness, the reminder that even the strongest brotherhoods can fall apart under the weight of ambition and pride. Among the 5 names Wayne Gretzky could never forgive, Messier's stands first. He was the friend who became a rival, the brother who proved that even legends can be divided by the game they love most. Number 4. Patrick Roy. Patrick Roy was one of the few players who could challenge Gretzky's brilliance head-on. While Gretzky dominated the offensive side of the game, Roy ruled the net with unmatched arrogance and confidence. He was the wall every scorer dreaded, the man who made goalies believe they could win games by themselves. For Gretzky, he was not just a rival, but a constant reminder that genius could exist on the other side of the rink. Their rivalry began in the late 1980s, when the Edmonton Oilers faced Roy's Montreal Canadiens. Gretzky had built a reputation as a magician who could see openings no one else could. But Roy refused to be dazzled. He stared down every move, tracking Gretzky's eyes instead of the puck. In one unforgettable night at the Montreal Forum, Roy stopped 3 straight shots from Gretzky in overtime. The crowd erupted, and Roy raised his glove high, almost taunting the greatest scorer the game had ever known. That moment stayed with Gretzky. He respected Roy's talent, but could not forget the look in the goalie's eyes after each save. It was the kind of look that said, "Not tonight." For a man who thrived on outsmarting defenders, facing someone who read him so well felt like a rare defeat. Every meeting after that carried tension. Gretzky would glide into the offensive zone and Roy would lock in waiting, daring him to try again. When Gretzky joined the Los Angeles Kings, the battles continued. Roy, now more confident than ever, became a wall between Gretzky and another championship. In one playoff series, Roy shut down nearly every scoring chance, leaving Gretzky frustrated but silent. After the final horn, Gretzky shook his head and later told a reporter that some saves live in your memory longer than goals. Roy's defiance struck a chord that Gretzky never forgot. He had played against tougher men and faster players, but none who challenged his mind the way Roy did. The Montreal crowd adored Roy's swagger, while Gretzky carried the quiet dignity of defeat. Over the years, their mutual respect grew, yet that feeling of unfinished business never left. In retirement, Gretzky often spoke with admiration for great goalies, but his tone would always shift slightly when Patrick Roy's name appeared. It was not anger, but something colder, something that never faded with time. Roy had denied him at the moments that mattered most, and those memories still echoed in his mind. For Wayne Gretzky, Patrick Roy was the rival who turned every game into a duel of intellect and willpower. He could admire him, he could respect him, but forgiveness was something else entirely. Number 3. Denis Potvin. Before Wayne Gretzky became the great one, there was a man who stood between him and the Stanley Cup. That man was Denis Potvin, captain of the New York Islanders. Strong, disciplined, and unshakable, Potvin led a dynasty that ruled the NHL before the rise of the Edmonton Oilers. For young Gretzky, the Islanders were the mountain he had to climb, and Potvin was the face of that mountain. Their clashes in the early 1980s were brutal and unforgettable. The Islanders were the defending champions, filled with veteran players who had already conquered the league. Gretzky and the Oilers were the new wave, fast and creative, but inexperienced. When they met in the 1983 Stanley Cup Final, Potvin made it clear that experience would win over talent. His team outmuscled Edmonton in every zone. Every time Gretzky touched the puck, Potvin was there, cutting him off, hitting him, reminding him that the NHL still belonged to the old guard. One hit from that series became part of hockey history. Potvin caught Gretzky near the boards with a perfect shoulder check. The impact silenced the crowd. Gretzky fell hard, and for a few seconds the arena froze. He got up quickly, but that single play symbolized the difference between the two teams. Edmonton was learning how to win. The Islanders already knew. New York swept the series, leaving the young Oilers stunned. Years later, Gretzky often said that losing that final changed everything. It forced the Oilers to grow up to understand what real toughness meant. But even with respect for Potvin's leadership, Gretzky never forgot the sting of that defeat. Potvin had been ruthless, always calm, always in control, the kind of opponent who made you question your own limits. The next year, Gretzky came back stronger. Edmonton won the Cup, beginning a new dynasty. Yet the shadow of the Islanders and Potvin's authority never disappeared. Gretzky admired him as a leader, but deep down he remembered how it felt to be humiliated on the biggest stage. Potvin represented the wall Gretzky had to break through to become a legend. He was the man who taught him that skill alone could not win championships. And while Gretzky eventually surpassed him, the memory of those battles stayed sharp. It was not about hatred born from anger, but from pain, from the reminder of how far he had to go. For Wayne Gretzky, Denis Potvin was not just an opponent. He was the lesson written in bruises and silence. Respect grew from that rivalry, but forgiveness never did. Number 2, Claude Lemieux. Claude Lemieux was the kind of player who never cared about being liked. He played with intensity, provoked opponents, and lived for moments that turned games into wars. Every team that faced him knew what was coming. He hit hard, talked louder, and always found a way to make people angry. For Wayne Gretzky, he was not just another rival. He was the embodiment of everything that tested his patience and pride. Their tension started in the mid-1990s when Gretzky was with the Los Angeles Kings and Lemieux was building his reputation as one of the most controversial players in the league. Lemieux had a reputation for crossing lines, and against Gretzky he showed no mercy. One playoff night, he came from behind and delivered a hard check that sent Gretzky face first into the boards. The arena fell silent. Gretzky stayed down for a few seconds before skating off, his expression unreadable. Reporters later said that Gretzky refused to comment on the hit, but everyone knew how much it angered him. He was a player built on respect and fair play, and Lemieux represented the opposite. Lemieux did not just want to win. He wanted to hurt pride. He wanted to make the greatest player alive feel vulnerable. That was what made the rivalry so personal. In later seasons, their paths crossed again. Every time the tension returned, Gretzky avoided confrontation, focusing on his game, but the sight of Lemieux always brought back that memory. Even in post-game interviews, Gretzky's calm tone would change slightly when Lemieux's name came up. It was not hatred in words, but in silence. For Lemieux, the incident was just part of hockey. For Gretzky, it was something deeper. It went against everything he believed the sport should stand for. Hockey was supposed to be about skill, discipline, and honor. Lemieux turned it into chaos. Gretzky could forgive physical battles. He could forgive rivalries built on respect. But he could never forgive someone who disrespected the spirit of the game. Years after retirement, when asked about the hardest opponents he ever faced, Gretzky mentioned defenders and goaltenders with admiration. But when someone brought up Claude Lemieux, he simply paused. That pause said everything. Some memories do not fade, no matter how many seasons pass. For Wayne Gretzky, Claude Lemieux was the rival who turned competition into bitterness. He was the player who made him realize that greatness often comes with enemies who play by different rules. And for that reason, Lemieux's name will always remain one that Gretzky could never forgive. Number 8. Scott Stevens. Scott Stevens was the kind of defenseman who changed the mood of every rink he entered. Big, disciplined, and fearless, he played the game with an intensity that few could match. For most players, facing him meant expecting pain. For Wayne Gretzky, it meant surviving the kind of physical challenge that tested not just skill, but courage. Their rivalry began in the early 1990s when Gretzky's Los Angeles Kings met Stevens and the New Jersey Devils. Stevens was known for clean but devastating hits. He studied his opponents, waited for the perfect second, and struck with precision. Gretzky was the master of anticipation, but even he could not always escape the storm. One night in particular became unforgettable. Gretzky carried the puck through the neutral zone looking for an opening. In a flash, Stevens stepped forward and delivered a thunderous body check that sent Gretzky crashing to the ice. The crowd went silent before erupting. Gretzky stood up slowly, blood running from his nose, his expression calm but distant. That hit became one of the most replayed moments in hockey history. Stevens was praised for his timing. Gretzky was praised for his composure. But inside that moment stayed with him. He never spoke badly about Stevens, yet every time the highlight appeared, he looked away. The hit symbolized everything he disliked about the direction hockey was taking. For him, the sport was about vision and skill, not destruction. When people later called Stevens the ultimate enforcer, Gretzky admitted that he respected his strength but could never forgive the violence that came with it. Stevens represented the side of hockey that Gretzky tried to rise above. He had built his career on avoiding hits, not delivering them. To be taken down like that felt like seeing his philosophy challenged in the most brutal way possible. Over time, their paths crossed in charity events and interviews. Both men spoke respectfully, but the memory never faded. Even years later, when fans asked Gretzky about the toughest opponents he ever faced, his answer was always the same. He would pause and say that some players make you play smarter and others make you play braver. Scott Stevens made him do both. Still, that respect never erased the feeling of what happened on that ice. The collision between Gretzky's finesse and Stevens's power became a symbol of two worlds colliding. For Gretzky, it was more than a hit. It was a moment that reminded him that even the Great One could bleed. Scott Stevens stands as the final name on Wayne Gretzky's list of players he could never forgive. Not out of hatred, but because that one unforgettable hit marked the day when skill met force and the beauty of the game was replaced by its brutality. 5 names, 5 memories that never left Wayne Gretzky. Mark Messier, Patrick Roy, Denis Potvin, Claude Lemieux, and Scott Stevens. Each of them shaped his story in a different way. Some were friends turned rivals. Others were opponents who tested his limits. Together they formed the scars and lessons behind his greatness. Gretzky's career was built on elegance, intelligence, and discipline. He avoided fights and preferred to let his game speak for him. Yet behind that calm surface lived a man who remembered everything. Every hit, every word, every betrayal became a piece of his history. For fans, he was the symbol of perfection. For those who played against him, he was the target to beat. The truth is that greatness never comes without pain. The Great One carried both glory and wounds. The rivalries that once fueled his anger later became the stories that defined his era. Hockey was never just a game of goals and trophies for him. It was about pride, survival, and respect earned through fire. Today at 64, Wayne Gretzky looks back not with regret but with clarity. Those 5 names remind him that even legends are human, that behind every victory, there are memories that refuse to fade. Greatness is not only measured by how many records you break, but by how many times you rise after being hit. Wayne Gretzky did that better than anyone. And in every quiet moment when he thinks of those 5 men, he knows that they helped shape the great one he became.